Well, good morning, my friend. Welcome to the Pastor's Podcast. Good to have you with me as we end out the week and the last Friday of the month of April. And in Oklahoma has finally got our April showers, and we're looking forward to the May flowers that are coming. And probably have another week of rain coming up, but that's okay. And looking forward to the water table getting back up. Hope you had a good week. Had a good day yesterday. Of course, meetings with the staff and then soul winning in the morning and seeing people saved and getting people lined up to come to church on Sunday. That's always a good time out. And despite everything else that goes on, boy, how we can certainly get people ready to come to church. I hope that you have a good weekend. Hope that you're striving to see what God can do through you this weekend as we try to reach more people for Christ. I always tell my church, there is never an off day. Every service and every weekend is a great day. One of the greatest mistakes that we make is we only push during a campaign time and then we stop. I understand we push a little bit more during a campaign time, but we got to push all the time. And that is very critical that we do that. Well, today, I want to talk to you about backsliding just for a moment. In 2 Chronicles 33 and verse 2, the scripture says, "But he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, like unto the abominations of the heathen, whom the Lord had cast out before the children of Israel." Now, Hezekiah was a godly example. I want you to listen to this phrase for most of his life. There was one short time in Hezekiah's life that he backslid. Now, he didn't backslide like what we would consider backsliding, going to drugs, alcohol, being what we call deep sin, but he did backslide. But after God healed him, he strayed from God for a short moment, but then he came back to God after he backslid. Now, the damage of backsliding for any amount of time is, can I tell you, there is always damage that is done during that short amount of time. Manasseh, what's interesting is Manasseh was born during the time of Hezekiah's backsliding. Manasseh was influenced during his dad's short period of backsliding to Manasseh's destruction. The phrase, "but he did that which is evil in the sight of the Lord," is a direct result of Hezekiah backsliding for a moment. Hezekiah could not take back the influences that exposed his son to things he should not have done when he backslid for a moment. You see, the short time of backsliding resulted in a child doing evil. Had Hezekiah never backslidden, Manasseh would have never learned the wrong ways to live. Now, it doesn't matter how good of a life you live. One moment of backsliding will influence and expose your children to evils that they would have never learned if you never backslid. I can tell you story after story of parents who backslid for a moment, then they came back to God, but it resulted in their children going the way of the world. It was Lot who was exposed to Egypt while Abraham backslid for a moment and went down to Egypt just for a short time. Abraham got right, but the influence on Lot's life never left Lot. You see, the tragic story of Lot is because of Abram's moment of backsliding. You can do much good in your life, but one moment of sin that influenced those you love can never be taken back. The exposure to sin will destroy all the good that you invested in your children and those that you love. I can show you many parents who compromise for a short period. And in that short period of compromise, they exposed their children to the wrong way of serving God. You cannot run with compromisers for any length of time without your children learning to the compromisers' ways. I can think of good parents who knew they were compromising, but for the sake of popularity and getting along with friends, they did not take a stand. Now they regret the moment of compromise because they've lost their children to worldly churches. One moment of backsliding or compromise is one moment you can never take back the influences these actions had on your children. You never know who you're influencing when you backslide. So therefore, you should never waste 1 minute away from God. 1 minute away from God, from the Lord's influences, influences others to live that one moment in a wrong influence that will never leave that person's life. You've got to make every minute of your life count for God. So your children and those following you are always influenced for right. No, we can never guarantee that your children or those following you will turn out right for God if you do something. But we can guarantee that we can give your children the best chance to do right if we don't expose them to sin or compromising ways. It's not going to be easy taking a stand against compromise, but it is easier to take a stand against compromise than it is to experience the life of hurt and watching your children destroy themselves and their family in worldly churches and sin. If you don't want to expose those you love to wrong influences, then never settle to backslide for 1 second so that you can protect them from the world's influences. Oh, I can tell you, I can think of people, but you see, we got people that they're just afraid to separate. Preachers will get up and they lower their stand on the King James Bible, and people will stay in that church. Think, well, I don't believe that. Yeah, but the problem is you may not believe it, but your children do. And you staying in that church tells your children you're okay with going to another version. You're okay with that. When you stay, mom and dad, when you stay in a liberal church that's not standing for right, that's not soul winning, you say, well, I believe in soul winning and I believe in standing right. But you're staying there and you're telling your children it's okay to stay. I'm telling you right now, there are scores of young people that are now adults they're the ones that attack us. They're the ones that hate what we do. They're the ones that hate the standards. They're the ones that, because they've not yet been to the hurt of sin. But a lot of it's because of a mom and dad or a preacher who compromised just a little. Just a little. You listen to me, preacher. For you to preach, have a compromising preacher in who will preach with anybody and everybody. Listen to me. You're exposing your church to compromise. You can justify your compromise by preaching with this person any way you want, but it's compromise. And that little bit of compromise opens the door. And let me tell you something. Anytime you open the door to compromise, Satan's going to kick it wide open for a bunch of people to go through that door. You better never crack the door to compromise. You keep that door slammed shut. You do right all the time. And when something comes up, have the backbone to stand and say, nope, not going to do that. If your church takes a wrong stand, get out of the church. You say, why? Because it's better to get out, move. I mean, listen, you say there's no churches in my area. Okay, then move to an area where there is a good church. But don't you dare stay in a compromising church for 1 second. It only takes a short amount of time of compromise for children to be exposed to the world. Hezekiah, I think, would have never compromised had he had known what was going to happen to Manasseh. That one short time of compromise led to a whole child's life to be destroyed by compromise and eventually death. If you love your children, you love your grandchildren, if you love your ministry, pastor, if you love your church, slam the door shut to compromise. Never crack it open. Once you crack it open, it'll be slapped wide open by Satan. And your people will be exposed to something. And one day you look back and say, how did I ever get there? To exactly how. You crack the door to compromise. Don't crack the door. You keep it shut because you're going to pay a dear price for that moment of compromise that you should have shut the door when you knew better, but you didn't. Because you didn't want to stir the waters. You didn't want to go against the crowd. I'd rather go against the crowd and keep my family right than to go with the crowd and lose my whole family and my grandchildren along the way. My friend, let this be a warning. Let it be a warning. Oh, this is a very important warning that everybody learns. Let's not have one moment to compromise, to backslide, because we always influence others to the wrong. Well, I hope this is a help and an encouragement to you today. Now, let's remember today, be good to everyone. Everyone's having a tough time. Have a great weekend, my friend.